The MACIS will open its first panel discussion entitled Art and Investment, Unlocking the Value of Creativity. So we'll be more serious now. The high-level conversation brings together an exceptional group of experts to explore how the creative economy can attract investment, generate sustainable value, and position art and culture as a key driver of economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, this panel will feature Meagan Kelly Horsman, the Managing Director of Christie's Middle East UAE, Mr. Sidaoui, a prominent art collector and founder of the Yes Collection in the UAE, Mrs. Pam Mutembei, is it okay? Sure. Ms. Pam Mutembei, Investment Director and Board Director of HEVA Fund from Kenya. We have Mr. Shaan Kundomal, International Barrister Financier, Entrepreneur, Energy and Financial Services Principal. This panel will be moderated by Mr. Nanda Narrainen, the Director of Knowledge and Creative Industry at the Economic Development Board. This discussion will examine how art can evolve beyond cultural expression into dynamic investment asset class. Ladies and gentlemen, this session aims to highlight new investment models in the creative industries, strengthen dialogue between artists, investors, policymakers, and collectors, as well as exploring how Mauritius can position itself as a regional hub for art and culture and creative economic development. Let me introduce you to our vibrant moderator, Mr. Nanda Narrainen, who is the Director of Knowledge and Creative Industry at the Economic Development Board. He also heads other departments for the promotion of sports, economy, business support, unity at the EDB. Nanda has also been instrumental in the development of film industry since 2019 and in full implementation of the film rebate scheme in 2013. He has also contributed into several government agencies as board member and has contributed to the formulation and implementation of several policy and strategy to position Mauritius as an attractive destination for trade and investment. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nanda Narrainen on stage.
First, I would like to thank ZeeArts for making this possible again to have an Art and Investment Summit today. I must say that this has been a long effort. Since we started, we did the Art and Finance Conference a couple of years ago. And what we are doing here today is we are reaping the benefits, because from the time we did the Art and Finance Conference to study the strategy, the ecosystem that is required, and from where we are now, it could be that we haven't made much progress materially, but I can say in terms of policy, in terms of decision making, there are lots of things that has been done. And if we are here today, it's a testimony that government has a strategy, government has a vision to make art as an important pillar in Mauritius, as an economic pillar for the country. And I've heard from many speakers today that the word Africa keep repeating, and I must tell you also that in all sectors it's like this. Mauritius stands as a bridge, it's true, in terms of trade, in terms of investment, in terms of export of services, and art is one of the capabilities that we have, the talents that we have, the growing talents, creative talents that we have, to export this service in the region. So without further ado, I would, ZeeArts has already introduced all the speakers, and I would like now to, I know that we have online Mrs. Meagan, who has already joined us, Meagan Kelly Horsman. I think you are already connected. So Meagan Kelly Horsman, who is the Managing Director of Christie's Middle East, She's joining us online. And our second speaker, second panelist, who is Sidaoui, who is the founder of Yes Collection, the Yes Collection. I would like now to invite Mrs. Pam Mutembei, who is the investment director of HEVA Fund. Allow me also to invite Mr. Shaan Kundomal, who is an entrepreneur, very active, financier, and barrister. So I did my homework a bit last night. I didn't have much time. I just want to share with you on a global perspective how the art market is doing. We know art as a creative subject, but probably we know very little about art as a product, as an investment, as an asset class. So what I gathered yesterday when I read the art market report published by 𝗍𝗲𝗁𝗍𝗲, I think a week ago it was published. I will share with you a few findings that has captured my attention. In the key finding, it says the global art market sales has increased by 4%. So we're talking about the 25 figures year on year, an increase by 4% to an estimated 59.6 billion USD. So this gives you an indication about the size of the art market on a global scale. Talking about auction, we have Meagan Kelly Horsman, who is with us today. I think you're already aware about what I'm going to share with the audience. Public auction sales raised by 9% in value after contraction in 2024. But in contrast, the private sales at auction declined by 15%. The US, UK, and China account for 76% of the global sales. US maintained its position at 54%, and the rest is being shared by the big market, UK, China, and even France. And I was looking for figures for Africa, I couldn't get it. Nevertheless, be it small like it is, I think Africa contributes to 1 or 2% of the global performance. There's significant concern for the art trade given policy unpredictability by the US government. And I think we have to take this into account in terms of policy population, strategy population, what is happening in the world to ensure that we adjust our strategy accordingly. So we will go now to, we have 4 panelists with us, the 4 panelists that I mentioned. We will go straight forward to the question. Probably I will start with Meagan. Given your great exposure that you have in auction, is Meagan with us?
Yes.
Okay.
I am indeed. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you. Welcome. So Meagan, I would ask you, from an auction perspective and your experience, how do you view that relationship between art and investment? Your experience, especially in the Middle East.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so sorry not to be with you all in person today. I was very much looking forward to coming back to Mauritius. But sadly, the universe had other plans, I think, this time. So I look forward to coming again and seeing you in person. So yeah, thank you so much. And as mentioned, I'm Meagan. I'm based in the UAE for the last 16 years. I joined Christie's in 2022. And we have operations here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and some colleagues in Qatar also. So we have quite a regional perspective. And, you know, I think I'd like to sort of look first maybe at how the UAE has evolved into this global hub for art trade. There's been more international interest in this region, I think, than ever before. You know, we had Art Basel in Qatar opening in February. Frieze, which is a London, New York and Seoul-based art fair opening later this year, we hope, here in Abu Dhabi. But we've also seen, more investment here from galleries that, historically operated just in Europe and the US. So we're seeing this great moment of interest in the Middle East, but how has that come to be and what does that look like? And what are collectors looking at now in terms of investment? How has that evolved? Certainly the clientele has evolved, and with that, so has their taste and their motivations for collecting art. There are many, many different types of collectors. It would be hard for me to summarize it all in one go, but I would say that here in the UAE, we have people such as my esteemed panelist, Charles, who we'll be hearing from later, of course, who has developed a very specific eye and primarily focuses on collecting in his home for his enjoyment, but also opening up that space for talks, for programming, for the community, and for visiting international stakeholders. So, Charles is someone who's very open with his collection. Now, not all collectors are like that. There are many collectors that buy very privately, they don't share their collection, we don't see it, not for want of not wanting to share, but perhaps it doesn't suit their lifestyle or their needs at this time. We also have collectors like 𝗪𝗃𝗲𝗁𝗁𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗍 from Sharjah, who's based between Dubai and Sharjah here in the UAE, who has a very specific collecting strategy, which is to collect 50% women artists and only exhibit exhibitions that have 50% female inclusion, but also to collect at least one masterpiece work by every artist from the Arab world. So I think, those are just two examples of sort of collecting strategies. Now, Charles and Sultan have both been collecting for a very long time. And I think over that time period, your motivations, your taste, your modes of purchasing change. They evolve based on, your surroundings, your experience, visiting other collectors' homes, finding experts that you can work with and that you can trust. I think that that's something that we've seen has really helped develop a really strong collector base here, and long may it continue, even in these uncertain times. I think it's also interesting when you think about investment. Of course, we look at it with a financial lens. I think everybody on this panel would be lying if they said they don't. I collect art, I have it here behind me at home. The financial aspect, of course, is something that people have to take into consideration. You think about, why should I buy this art now? What does it mean? And I think, when it comes to investments, clients want to know that the price they pay truly reflects value, whether it's financial or cultural, and they like the certainty of knowing that should they need to sell, they have the ability to do so. With art, there is so much more than just financial value, though. So when you buy a work of art, you support an entire infrastructure from the grassroots all the way to auction. When you think about it, you support art suppliers, art supply stores to artists, curators, writers, institutions, and galleries. So it's really a sort of collective whole, because art for a financial investment, there might be better ways to invest your money, but will you have as much enjoyment and fulfillment in supporting culture? So the sort of cultural investment of collecting art and supporting the visual arts can't be undermined. For myself, just to give you some reflection points on how the market's evolved here, we've really seen over the last few years that younger collectors are entering this space in a very, very serious way. In fact, Dubai is the #1 youngest office for Christie's in the world. And I think that sort of reflects the population, the demographics, but also the interest levels. So our average age client is 40, and I think in the rest of the world, it's closer to 50. So that tells you a little bit that the next generation of collectors are already buying, they're already engaged, they're already interested in this cultural capital. I've also seen a real stride forward, and I know it was in multiple reports, UBS and others on the art market, that the rise of women collectors has really grown in the last year or two in particular. But I sort of wonder if some of that is that we're only just seeing it visible now, or if there has indeed been a huge increase there. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Meagan. You were talking about the age group of young collectors. Recently, I've been in Africa, and what
Yes.
I was really surprised is that when you compare Africa to other nations, other countries in the world, the median age actually is 40. But when you look at Africa, surprisingly, it's 19. And when you see all these young Africans, the talent, the creative talent that they have at this young age, coupled with very young, art collectors, this really impressed me. I think when we keep saying Mauritius want to become a bridge for Africa, between Africa and Asia, but we need also to understand the substance behind it. How we're going to this? How we're going to do this? One more question before we move to another panelist. I would like to ask you, given your experience in the Middle East, and so far we don't really have a well-settled art auction in the region, especially in Africa, do you think there is a good economic reason for Mauritius to position itself as an art auction center? What really, what are the ingredients, according to your experience, we need to put up to succeed in this field?
Yeah, good question. Just like baking, ingredients is incredibly important, and timing is everything. I think Mauritius is very well set up. It's done great work in becoming an attractive place to both visit and invest. It's ranked #1 in the Global Peace Index in 2024. I know that the Ministry of Culture runs the National Arts Fund and provides really good support. So we can see through initiatives like this and what we're all doing here today, and we did in 2024 with the first conference, is really highlighting what's happening now, bringing international and regional stakeholders together to encourage really strong dialogue, education and support for one another, and building those really strong links. In terms of expanding arts ecosystem in Mauritius, there are of course a variety of ways to do so, none of which are particularly easy or fast, but to have a strong plan in place to expand cultural visibility is key. Through initiatives like this one, the visibility of both Mauritius and its culture are at centre stage. And this can be expanded through bringing more stakeholders into the programme, which ZeeArts has done so successfully, and running events throughout the year that tap into the locally based artists and collectors, really building that knowledge, momentum and support. Across the world, we've also seen the rise of collaborations, and they can be found in unexpected places. The art world and banking institutions, for example, have long held collaborative events with 𝗍𝗲𝗁 Art Fair, and that's something we've actually worked on at Christie's Middle East too, with partners like Standard Chartered and Jupiter Wealth Advisors. What these collaborations can bring is more visibility, more money, and more access to a different pool of people that want to invest in this way. I think in terms of making Mauritius an auction capital, I couldn't see why not. I would say that the infrastructure has to be there. And this is something that the UAE is looking at heavily at this time. We've just seen last year another auction house held a collectors week in Abu Dhabi. And Abu Dhabi's DCT, the Department of Culture and Tourism, has given a blanket 3-year freeze on import duty for art into the UAE if it's your private collection. So there are ways in which governmental support can be instrumental, not just through grants and funding, but also as a way to alleviate financial pressure on collectors themselves and the arts ecosystem. So I always say that lower import duty does help. And I think here in the UAE, that's certainly something that has been looked at also. It's currently at 5% versus Mauritius 15%, for example. And I think this sort of the government-led institutions, they can't be in silo. You know, you also need the community to come together. And as you say, Mauritius is a bridge between Africa and Asia. It's extremely well located, it's safe, it's vibrant, people want to spend time there. All the ingredients are there. It's about ensuring that stakeholder agreement and support and moving forward.
Thank you, Meagan. Good morning, Shaan. Are you with us?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. I have one question for you, Shaan. Being an art collector, I wanted to know, how do you make your decision? What are the factors that you take into account when deciding in terms of art collection? Do you have behind it, does it need to be, there is an economic reason, or it's driven purely by passion? Can you elaborate on this?
Yes. Firstly, I would like to thank you and thank Zahira for inviting me to this panel. As Meagan mentioned earlier on, we're so upset that we could not make it this time. We're so much looking forward to be with you and meeting you in person, especially that Mauritius holds a special place in my heart. This is where I spent my honeymoon 36 years ago. And I've been there since many times, but I was looking forward to come and see you there. But thank you again for the invitation. Now, when it comes to the art collection part, first of all, nobody was born as an art collector, unless they were born into a family of collectors. But it comes with time, and you start collecting slowly and then organically, and then there is a learning curve in the process. But what I always advise people when they collect art, there are few elements to it. First and foremost, you need to love art. So don't invest into art just for the sake of investing, because you can give this task to somebody else to do for you, and they can probably give you some good returns or excellent returns on their investments. But definitely you should first start thinking that you love art and that you are collecting because you have an affinity to the art itself. Second point, never ever buy a piece of art that you will not hang on your wall. This is always say that. I would never ever, even if it's a very attractive price, but I don't like the art itself, it doesn't matter. I always want to hang it on my wall. I want to enjoy the art that I purchase. Now, is it a coup de cœur? Sometimes yes, you buy it because you love the art, and you don't think about the financial implications in terms of investments or return on investments onto it. But with time, you develop a certain outlook, a certain understanding, and as I said, the learning curve, that you have a better eye and a better decision-making process. I'll give you an example. It's not every Picasso that is worth a lot of money, but you need sometimes to look at the timing or the period this artist excelled into this. These things I did not know when I started collecting. So now I know these things. I tend to be a bit more careful about the period of the artist and what kind of work was successful in his times or successful in his current times or not. But mostly love for art, and obviously the second consideration is the financial reward that comes out of this art collection.
Thank you, Shaan. Is there any particular way that you use, any model, any tools that you use to follow artists?
But to follow artists,
yes, to follow the trend, to follow.
Yes, of course. Nowadays, with the accessibility of internet,
I was thinking about whether AI today might be helpful to art collectors to study the trends, to make rational decision making.
Probably, but I don't use AI myself. I still want to enjoy the pleasure of searching, talking to artists, visiting studios, visiting auctions, visiting galleries as a person, because AI can give you trends, but this is purely for a financial point of view. There are three elements: the love for art, the financial reward, and there is a third element that people don't maybe realize at first. is the social promise of art. You know, if I were not a collector myself, I would not be sitting in front of you or with you today on this panel. I would not be meeting tremendously great people and a completely different background than from my current work. This social promise has a lot of value, but it's intangible, but it is part of the whole system of acquiring and buying art. And that's what I advise people to keep in mind, is that when you start collecting, you'll be surprised what kind of environment you enter. So coming back to your question, do I use AI? This is purely for following trends. I do, of course. I do look at the trends. I read research, reports, etc. Because everybody wants to see an appreciation in the value of his art collection. Nobody wants to see an appreciation. But this is not the only part. Art brings such much more things to your life than just only the financial reward.
Okay, thank you, Shaan. I shall now turn towards Shaan Kundomal. Shaan, you are actually a financier, barrister, and entrepreneur. You know, when we started into the process of strategy development a few years ago, so every people that I've been meeting to start to initiate, I would even say to educate people about the strategies that we intend to develop to have an art and finance cluster in Mauritius. The first thing that I've come across, I mean, the question I got is, art is very illiquid. So when it's illiquid, it represents high risk to turn this asset into liquid. So my first question to you would be, as an entrepreneur, you are at the forefront probably. You face investors on a daily basis. What is the basis? How would you build up your investment strategy, for example, to convince an ultra high net worth individual, I would say, to invest in art? How would you do that?
Thank you very much, and thank you to my fellow panelists. So I am going to be slightly more bold than my predecessors on the panel, in the sense that I've heard words like the coup de cœur coming from collectors. And this is about passion, and this is about the love of the aesthetic, the love of the emotion that comes with it. Sadly, when we have to look at it purely from an investment perspective, one has to be a bit more bold. And analyze art as an asset class implies that you understand the value, the intrinsic monetary value. Now, it almost is a contradiction, because when you tend to speak about things like the arts, you're talking about something which is elevated, which is pleasing to the eye, and you have to bring it back to the monetary aspect. It's almost a contradiction at first, but it's something that we have to address. Now, you do have two levels, or two markets for art pieces. You have what is known as a primary market and as a secondary market. In terms of your primary market, so the value of an artist, of an upcoming artist, will depend on a number of variables. One of them being who is selling the art, and number two, where it is being sold at. So this creates the initial market for, let's say, an upcoming artist. What type of exposure does it have? And this then requires a particular form of analysis for the discerning investor in terms of identifying what is the trajectory of this particular artist. And trajectory means how is his international reputation growing? Where are his exhibits being showcased? Are they participating? Yesterday evening, I think it was Zahira, she mentioned about the Biennale of the Indian Ocean. Now, getting exposure in biennales or in museums is what will drive the value of the artist up for the primary market perspective. Of course, as the notoriety starts to become more entrenched for that artist as their exhibits become more and more popular, and as they move on a secondary market where their pieces then become, go to places like Christie's and auction houses. Then they go on a secondary market where they have bidders. It creates a bit more liquidity at this stage, to answer your first question. So this will also depend in terms of how popular this artist is becoming. It will, of course, always depend on demand and supply, how many new pieces are being brought to the market by that artist that has reached a certain notoriety, and whether or not that level of the pricing of that particular art piece is being kept over time. So once they created that, another important aspect is the traceability and the different price points at which the art pieces by that particular artist are going, and who is buying. Because if you have a very famous collector that is buying a particular artist, that also contributes in the trajectory of this artist. Is getting visibility at the level or at the reach where he needs to get that particular visibility, at the right galleries and the right hands of the right collectors. Now, lastly, so this is very important in terms of investors who want to look at it outside of the emotional aspect and purely from an empirical perspective to understand the inherent market value of the art. And also you mentioned the illiquidity. Yes, you cannot just simply go and say like it's not a stock market, it's not a stock that you're holding on that you can freely trade and just go to your broker. You can go to an art broker or you can go to a gallery, but it doesn't mean that you will be able to sell your art piece at the exact time when you're placing it on the market. There's a whole process to it. What you could do, and increasingly I heard Meagan speaking about banks such as Standard Chartered that have private wealth divisions that advise in art, but they not only advise in art nowadays, seen even in amongst our guests, we have some prominent bankers here. So they even also lend against art pieces. This is becoming increasingly popular. I am not sure if we have the ecosystem yet in Mauritius for it, but this is something that is being done for artists that have a particular reputation that are there.
Thank you, Shaan. I will just add to on what you said, talking about new financial instrument. This is what we call alt lending. Still, we don't have this kind of product actually in Mauritius. But this made me think about, we need some kind of credibility, some kind of trust that we have to build in this market to succeed. Today, if we have a successful property market, it's because when I have plans to build, to buy property, behind it there is credibility, there is trust. What do you think, is there any kind of mechanism that we need, similarly as we have in the property market? Do you think we need something like this to ensure success? Your own experience, I mean.
There are a number of areas within the art field that still require more structure. One of them is in terms of advisory versus being a broker or being a seller of art. You see, if your analogy to the real estate business or to real estate is very on point. If you want to buy a property, you go to a real estate agent, and that particular real estate agent, his job is to basically sell you that particular piece of property. If you want to know whether you're buying at the right market price or that property is not being inflated, then what you would do is you would go to an independent valuer and say, I would like you to please tell me what is the value of that, potential wear and tear of that particular developer and so on, and they will assign to you a value that is done in a very scientific method. Now, for art, again, this is not as straightforward as it is, because the value can change depending on the artist, on the reputation of the artist himself or herself. It can depend on how much pieces that artist is putting on the market. It can depend on you know, the exhibit, or there's certain things that can immediately impact the reputation of an artist. Not knowing who an artist is in some cases has actually made the price of that particular art go up, and if tomorrow that person would no longer become anonymous, then that would affect it negatively. Or if you have an artist that would get into some form of legal trouble or something like that, that would immediately affect the price of that art piece potentially. Unlike if tomorrow a property developer would get into some issue, the value of that property itself would not necessarily be affected. So I think this is something that you need to be particularly concerned, and therefore the valuation, as you rightly said, from a property perspective into the art world does not translate directly. Having said that, for artists that have reached that particular level of notoriety and that reputation, or that maybe no longer exist, but have been systematically present at auctions, in auction houses, and that have had consistent amounts of values, then it is easier to assign a value for those particular artists, and then it becomes something more ascertainable and something more palpable, more tangible, and the trajectory of that particular art can be sustained in the long term.
Thank you, Shaan. So probably this means that we need to train our people in terms of advisory services. Like we have art advisory firms that provides the expertise. What is the right art of work to be bought? You know? So probably we need to look into this. We have several management companies probably that can look into these opportunities, or even why not banks, I believe. So this is something crucial that we need to look at if we are to start with a good ecosystem. Thank you. I will now look at Pam Mutembei. Good morning to you. So I have a question to you regarding funds, regarding creative funds. We are very much interested in Mauritius with Art Fund. When we started discussion several years back, so one of our target was how to attract fund managers to set up Art Fund or Creative Fund in Mauritius. Given that we have a very good jurisdiction, financial jurisdiction in Mauritius, we say, why not can't we leverage on the existing asset that we have and add new product as a financial product to market? So my question to you would be, given that though we have the necessary framework, necessary legislation, which allows for someone who wants to set up an art or creative fund in Mauritius, do you think only by having the framework we can be successful in attracting these kinds of funds in Mauritius?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Zahira, for inviting us to this important discussion. So thank you to my other fellow panelists. Great conversation we're having here. But I'll take this question from a more macro approach, because the creative sector is a very wide sector with lots of subsectors, not just art. There's film, fashion, events, digital assets. So when you're creating a fund, I think you need to look at artists and creatives as a whole, so that you can be able to now get to the epicenter of how to support the creative ecosystem. So the work that we do, because we are a creative fund that supports the creative sector across Africa, we're a Pan-African fund. Essentially, I'll take investments here to say that we give money. We give funds to the creative ecosystem. I hope there are other people here who give money. And yes, so how you would be then able to approach this fund would be, why are the reasons why you want to take up this fund? We've spoken about, I had some of you, I think you're the one who mentioned that Africa is a burgeoning young continent. 70% of the world will be African youth by 2050, if you can look at that figure. And then you start to understand that the creative industry is the place where a lot of our youth population will be employed in, because already 33% of our young people are involved in the creative and arts space. So it's not a space, that's one of the reasons why you need to create a creative fund in Mauritius. The other thing is that Mauritius is that, we speak about it at really the hub, the bridge of exports and economic growth for the sector between the continent, Africa itself, and Asia. So export is a thing that we need to export our culture, and you being at the bridge here is something that shows that you're right at the center of the growth. And I really also wanted to, yesterday we met, that we saw the support that this country has from the national level, from the top office here in this country. And this top office shows that then there is a need for you guys to be able to continue pushing for the creative sector. And there's many ways that you can create this fund by de-risking. I, as an investor, what I'm interested in seeing is the de-risk aspect of supporting the creative, being able to give them money without the risk. I know Mr. Shah spoke about art being passion, but when we look at it as investors, it's purely as, can I make money and can I get a return on my money? Yeah. Though what we have approached it from a very early stage, where we de-risk these creatives by giving grants in the early stages, a lot of pre-investment support, a lot of capacity building, where we do upskilling and training to make them lendable and investable. Because arts and creative sector is not the same thing as traditional financing models. I've seen these bankers here who use traditional methods to lend. They want to see collateral, they want to see security, they want to see property, they want to take your child as security so that they can be able to give you money. But we are looking at different methods of lending and supporting the creative sector by using IP, by using royalties, by using the cyclic nature of how creatives are lent money to. Because if I'm in film, I have a production stage, I have a scripting, a production. By the time I'm monetizing, the bank wants me to pay on a monthly basis. That cannot happen. So we create models around cash flows from your fund that are supporting the creatives and meeting them at the real need that they have. Yeah. So those are the things that we do a lot. Capacity building even for the traditional lenders to understand that this is a collaborative effort. It's about partnerships. It's about sharing the knowledge that we have even with traditional finances, because the need is big. There's every year in Africa, in the continent, there's over 30 billion USD need for the creative sector, and this cannot only be supported by just impact funds such as ours. We also need private investors, we need high net worth individuals, we need the government to come in. And I think Mauritius has done a good job, even with the cash rebates that they provide for the film sector, and being aggressive in pushing for this narrative and the legislation that you have. So these are the things that we are doing. And it's important that I mention here that at HEVA, we run the biggest creative program across the continent. This year alone, we've deployed $30 million to the sector in form of grants and what I like to call concessional debts. Bankers don't want to look at me, which means it's affordable debt. And therefore, we are at the very epicenter and we're very passionate about the sector. Thank you.
So what would you require, mathematically, economically speaking, what would you require to set up a fund in Mauritius?
You already have the legal aspect down, you already have the legislation, it's already there. So
you spoke about de-risking.
Yes, Oh, okay. So as the government, how you can de-risk is one, provide guarantees. When you provide a guarantee, then investors can come quickly into the market and say, hey, the government is willing to take some of the risk away from the investor, and then the investor can meet you somewhere. I spoke about capacity building. A lot of the struggles with creatives is that it's an unstructured area. If you can all agree, it's very unstructured because creatives are very passionate, very, in the nuances, yeah? But we need structure, and currently we don't have a place where we can measure or have an index that shows that this creative, the creative aspect can be valued well. For example, Mr. Shah spoke about the global index, where for real estate, you can know this property is valued, or if you value this market here, you'll know this is what is the value. But the creative sector is quite unstructured, and I think there's an opportunity there for someone to create a global index for the creative ecosystem so that investors can see this is something that you can invest in, you can understand, because we only want to see something that's measurable. I can measure it. It can be financed, and if it can be financed, then it can be scaled, right? So without forms of measurement. And I also think there's a lot of risk in the creative sector because, we do know that art pieces have been used to finance terrorism, money laundering. So those are things that financiers and private financiers, especially in traditional lending institutions, are worried about. So they sort of find that this is a sector they really don't want to touch because they don't understand traceability, they don't understand where we can verify what's the source of truth. So I think a global index is an opportunity, or an index even that Mauritius says, we have an index, we can measure this, it's measurable. That is also something that I think you can do as a government.
Thank you, Pam. Before we move to the question and answers part, I will have a closing question that will address to each and every of you. So talking about strategy, policy, the vision that the government has, sharing your vision, what do you think would be the key initiatives, probably in order of priority? What do you think would be these initiatives that we have to get over, to initiate, to ensure that we build up the right ecosystem for the art market, or art as an asset class? Can I start by you, Shaan?
Well, thank you. I think one of the low-hanging fruits, and this is why I think earlier on Meagan spoke that 54% of art transactions happen in the United States. One of the reasons that motivates this is also because of tax rebates and tax allocations that are available. So if tomorrow, a foundation, a trust, or a family is donating art, or even a company is, then they can actually benefit from a tax rebate out of this. So I think one of the ways that we can, the government can act as a catalyst is to review the tax laws and ensure that tax rebates are available, or tax holidays are available in certain cases whereby art collectors, or even donating, or even lending, can actually, or purchasing, can benefit from it. Earlier on, Meagan also spoke about duties, bringing down the duties, import duties on art pieces. That will also be greatly helpful. So the first thing is to look at your tax ecosystem. And secondly, as well, is to prepare the physical, logistical ecosystem to keep art. For instance, where is it stored? Do we have a free port? What type of insurance companies? Because you would need to insure art that is in transit. And therefore, it has to be, as my fellow panelists previously mentioned, it's a whole ecosystem that has to work one between the other, between the insurance, between the government, between the galleries. So it's a whole platform that needs to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaan. Just to mention, to add, in the last budget, a measure was announced regarding art report, which is now a possibility. So we are working with the report developers to ensure that we have the right infrastructure. Quick word.
Thank you. Just probably add on to what Mr. Shah has said. I think collaboration amongst all the stakeholders is very important. Whether, as you're raising, especially if you're raising a fund, if the government puts in a bid, your pension funds are there, your private capital people are there. I think collaboration is key because this thing cannot be done alone. And it's one of the easiest way for an economy, a country, and our continent to create jobs for people, for the creative sector, for the young people that, as I said, are a huge population of our continent. It has strong economic drivers. There's lots of strong cash generating activities within the creative industry. And there's opportunity, there's money to be made. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we hear from you, Shaan?
And government and facilities and reduction in import duties and a lot of tax breaks. However, I need to add one more element to this because you need to push the private sector, the companies, the real estate companies, the tourists, the hotels, that they have the purchasing power, that they have money, is you need to get them more involved and incentivized in the overall acquisitions stage of art and development of young artists in Mauritius or in the region, and give them incentives and help to be seen, because it's a full ecosystem. It's not just only the pure financial side. These young emerging artists will be the future contributors to the art scene in Mauritius in this particular case or elsewhere. And the government cannot, by itself cannot do all the work. There is a major responsibility from the private sector, in my opinion, to be involved, but that they should be incentivized and pushed by the government to do so.
Thank you, Shaan. I'll leave the closing answer to Meagan.
Thank you so much, Nanda. And how did you know I have a full list of things to mention, but I'll try to be quick. I was going to say my 1/2 takeaway would be, how do you get this moving? Get people buying art. I know it sounds overly commercial, I know it sounds a bit aggressive, but what drives everything else? Collectors, what they buy. Get people shopping for art. It supports the ecosystem that's already there. So how do we do that? How do we get people to actually go ahead and do it? Let's make sure there's the right galleries on the island, that they are supported, and there's other vehicles for investment there too from the private sectors. As Charles mentioned, private sector is hugely important in driving growth in this area, and governments can't do it alone financially and generally because they don't have the expertise in the area. So that would be get people shopping, we like that. I also think Shaan's point on the infrastructure aspect cannot be ignored. I mean, people need art storage solutions and they also need art storage and shipment solutions. So as of now, like, you know, probably the biggest fine art movers and installers in the world are Crown and Hassenkamp and Detail. None of them have operations in Mauritius. So it's another vehicle for investment. What local friends, collectors, etc. want to support bringing a brand like that would help the long-term infrastructure setup. I think that's a really key aspect. And I wanted to say on Shaan's point on advisory, yes, it is a necessary part of the arts infrastructure and arts ecosystem, but again, what drives it? Collectors. Collectors employ the art advisors. Now, if you don't have a lot of collectors or that collectorship sort of culture, you don't have enough business for art advisors to be servicing collectors, and it can be a costly thing to set up. What I would say is perhaps some people in this room might be artists themselves, they might be involved in the art infrastructure in some way, and they can have this as an addition to what they offer, people they're already working with. My best tips on learning how to work in the advisory field, and it's, you know, an auction house, we work with advisors all the time. You know, I would say that in the UAE in the last 30 years, look, we've seen huge growth, but how many really good art advisors do I know? 12, maybe. There's not a lot. The reason is you don't make a lot of money. But there are things that can facilitate people educating themselves and providing that external sort of advisory, things like ArtNet or ArtPrice. These show all the prices sold on the secondary market for every single artwork since the 70s, essentially. And yes, there's a subscription fee, but it's probably $400 a year. So you do have vehicles there that you can look to. And of course, I loved Shaan's point also on art lending. And Christie's do have an art financial arm. We have Christie's Art Finance, where we service clients with collateral loans and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. But number one, get people shopping for art.
Thank you, Meagan. Thank you very much to all of you. We shall now take the Q&A. 10 minutes? Okay, so the floor is yours. Only 10 minutes for question and answers.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much, Zara, for such a beautiful conversation. I've deeply enjoyed this. I'm an artist myself, so this is very insightful to be understanding what works at the highest levels. My question is a bit two parts. I want to hear more about how HEVC is working, the fund is working to make artists bankable. I just want to hear a bit more about that, considering how informal the sector is here on the continent. And the amount of artists that do come from lower income backgrounds. So I'm very curious about that on one part. And then expanding that conversation a bit more, recently Société Générale in Ghana, Accra, is looking at art lending and building infrastructure around that. So I also want to hear a little bit more about what it would take for us on the continent who don't have the benefits of maybe Christie's track record and muscle to be able to be a middleman between the bank and the collectors. How can, in the art market, how can we quickly make up for the lost years and still be able to build infrastructure around art loans?
Okay, thank you. I didn't get your name? Whitney. Thank you, Whitney, for that question. I'll answer the one part of it, what we are doing, and then Mr. Shaan will answer the other one. We are an impact fund, so at the core of our business, even if it's commercial, impact is very important. So we do have a targeted approach to inclusivity, and especially young women and the youth of this continent. Currently, as I said, we're running a program that is geared towards, we have a foundation that has given us money to manage the fund, as we are an impact fund, which is geared towards supporting young women and in the creative sector, young women and youth in the creative sector, to put youth in work. So yes, we are very authentic and inclusive to make sure that yes, young artists, and the work that we do is, as I said, call it pre-investment first. So we do target early stage and even just new and emerging artists with grant support and sponsorship in various forms. After training, we have accelerators, incubation hubs, and entrepreneurial hubs that do things like capacity building, skilling. For example, you're a painter, we get an expert teacher to come and take you through coursework before you become lendable or investable. So there's a lot of pre-work that's done for young artists and young creatives before then they are given any money. And a lot of them, the support that young creatives like yourselves would get would be grant support, either to go to another country to showcase your work, which we call market access grants, or just pop-up markets, or even to buy equipment for you to do the work that you do or to create. So we do a lot of that, but we also, because we want you to be a monetizable and a sustainable business for the future, not just today, we also do business development skilling for the young artists. I think I'll take that part. I hope it's answered.
Thank you very much. Just I wanted to add something, my dear panel speakers. I'm the god of the time now, so please let's be very short and brief, even our speakers, if you have questions. But you had the opportunity to talk to our wonderful panel during the tea break, during the lunch. You can sit next to them. So please, Shaan, we have just 5 minutes left.
Yes, I'll be very brief. So I think that as a young artist, or as an artist that is first going to a primary market, and whether or not you think a collector can get lending to be in a position to buy your particular art piece, I think there's a gap in between. That gap is, at the end of the day, it goes back to the very essence of what art is, and that is going to how talented that particular artist is and the type of emotions it creates to a first level of collective. Like Charles, if tomorrow he would see a piece and say, please just name your price and I'm willing to buy for it, and a number of other people like him end up having the same type of emotion, then you're starting to get a particular market price, and that then allows you to go to Christie's or to go to other galleries, and as that creates your reputation and you become more famous and your exhibitions take place in the museums, it then creates the very basis from what the banks would then have to be in a position to assign what is a particular value that can be associated to that particular artist or those particular artworks. So there's a gap. It unfortunately takes time, and it's not something immediate, and I would say that it would be very difficult for a new artist to who has found someone who wants to buy his or her piece to go to a bank and say, I need a loan to buy that particular artwork. Sadly, as of now, this type of environment and ecosystem does not exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaan. Next question, only two more questions. There's one lady there at the back. Huh? Okay, there's two questions only. Yes.
Well, from what I've heard, we've got two extremes. One is make it as difficult as possible to be for artists to progress, because art is a process, and when they are assessed against a lot of things, one of the panelists said, makes it difficult. And then on the other one, we have the lady who gave a lot of interesting ways that artists could develop. So I believe what is happening is that there is a lack of understanding in the concept of being an artist. The process of developing an artist do not become a professional or do not become well known tomorrow. And then to say that
what is the question?
My question is, what can you do together, okay, to change this archaic thinking and make it more modern so that we as artists feel a part of it?
I think you answered this question already. You mentioned about partnership, collaboration, infrastructures, change in policy. I think these are...
No, there's more to it than that. There's education, there's other things which needs to go to be put in place. It's not only an infrastructure.
Yeah. So maybe we can debate on this. This will require a full-fledged workshop probably. We will try to take another question. There's the lady there.
Hello everyone, I am 𝗍𝗲𝗀𝗻 from l'Express newspaper. I have two quick questions. I know we are short of time. The first one is Mrs. Meagan Horsman from Christie's mentioned the National Arts Fund, but it has been freezed when we had a change of government. What would you recommend be the new things to be included in the new form of arts fund that the government could propose to the artistic and cultural world? That was the first. And with the current uncertain times in the Middle East, how could this be an opportunity for Mauritius in the arts market? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think I heard you correctly, but it wasn't super loud, so forgive me if I don't get it exactly right. Number one, it's a shame about that, the National Arts Fund. I wasn't aware, and things do get frozen, of course, with ministry budgets, so I'm not sure how I could advise on that, not have been privy to the full picture there. But I would say, that gives opportunity for other funds to step up and take space from the private sector, from private individuals, but also other arms of governmental entities, of course. With regards to the instability in the Middle East, I think that all of us here are reassessing and focusing on what we can do in this moment. So shipping is our biggest obstacle. So if you can help with that, that could be a great time for Mauritius. I would say, you know, doing what you're doing now, having this event really helps, and it helps drive interest and visibility to Mauritius and all of the facets of investment that it offers, whether that's cultural investment, financial, etc. So I would say utilize this time to think, to engage with the people sitting next to you, and to think of how this can be a unique moment, because even in times of crisis, opportunity is ripe.
Thank you. Meagan, thank you to all of you. We have come to the end of the first panel. I would like to thank all the panelists for this exciting, brilliant dialogue that we had on art and investment. So wish you all good luck and plenty of success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure being with you.